Did you know that UK families are spending an extra £2,000 each year due to inflation? That's right. Every single year, the cost of living is rising, and families are feeling the pinch more than ever. Bills are going up, groceries are costing more, and your savings just aren't stretching as far as they used to. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The impact of inflation goes far beyond the supermarket checkout. Energy bills are skyrocketing. Housing costs are climbing to levels that were once unimaginable, and transportation expenses are eating up even more of your paycheck. It's no wonder so many families feel like they're drowning in a sea of rising costs. And here's the kicker: the worst might be yet to come. If you're struggling to balance the budget, wondering how to keep up with prices, or questioning how to build a secure future in an inflation-riddled economy, you're not alone. Many families are facing the same tough choices: cutting back on essentials, skipping vacations, and even skipping out on important healthcare. So what's the secret to surviving and even thriving amidst all of this? Stick around, because in the next few minutes we'll reveal 10 shocking ways inflation is impacting UK families, and more importantly, how you can protect your finances in these unpredictable times. Keep watching. Your wallet will thank you later. Number 10. The struggle to build wealth. As inflation continues to climb, many UK families are facing a significant obstacle in their efforts to build wealth. With everyday costs rising and savings yields failing to keep up with inflation, it's becoming harder to set aside money for long-term goals like retirement, buying a home, or funding higher education for children. The financial strain is particularly tough for those who are already living paycheck to paycheck, or those without a solid financial cushion. For instance, families trying to save for a home deposit are finding that not only are house prices increasing, but they are also dealing with higher interest rates on mortgages. Even if you manage to save up the necessary deposit, the dream of buying a home may feel like an ever-moving target. With the rise in property prices outpacing wages, many young families are finding themselves locked out of the housing market altogether. Even those with some savings aren't immune. As mentioned earlier, inflation eats away at the real value of savings. This means that the money you've worked hard to set aside doesn't go as far as it used to, making it harder to achieve financial milestones. For example, if you've saved £5,000 for a rainy day fund, but inflation runs at 6%, that £5,000 is only worth £4,700 in real purchasing power. The struggle to build wealth in an inflationary environment can feel discouraging, but it's important to keep focused on long-term goals. Prioritizing debt reduction, diversifying investments, and seeking advice on financial planning can help families stay on track. Number 9. Shrinking disposable income. With inflation driving up the cost of living, many families in the UK are seeing their disposable income shrink. Disposable income is the money left over after you've covered your essential living costs like rent, utilities, and groceries. As prices continue to rise, the amount of money left for things like entertainment, dining out, and saving becomes smaller and smaller. This reduction in disposable income is forcing families to reconsider their spending habits and make sacrifices in areas that used to feel more comfortable. For example, many families are cutting back on things like family vacations, night out, and leisure activities. What once was an affordable treat for the family is now becoming a luxury many can no longer afford. Subscriptions to streaming services, gym memberships, and even hobbies like dining out are all being re-evaluated as families look to keep their budgets balanced. For those with tighter budgets, these lifestyle adjustments can be hard to accept. The social pressure to keep up with peers, especially when it comes to spending on experiences or having the latest products, can cause feelings of inadequacy. But in reality, many families are finding that by cutting back on non-essentials, they can still make it through the month without running into debt. The key to managing shrinking disposable income is prioritization. Setting a clear budget and focusing on needs rather than wants is more crucial than ever. It's also helpful to look for deals, discounts, and even free activities to replace once regular expenses. How are you managing with less disposable income? Share your strategies for cutting back and staying financially afloat in the comments below. Number 8. The growing burden of debt. As inflation continues to drive up the cost of living, many UK families are finding themselves increasingly reliant on debt to make ends meet. Whether it's using credit cards for everyday expenses, taking out loans, or opting for buy now pay later schemes, the growing burden of debt is becoming a significant concern. The situation is worsened by rising interest rates. In an effort to combat inflation, the Bank of England has raised rates, making borrowing money more expensive. This means families who are already carrying debt are now facing higher interest payments, further stretching their budgets. For example, if you owe £2,000 on a loan with a 5% interest rate, a rate hike could add an extra £100 per year to your payments. With credit card interest rates often hitting 20% or more, the cost of borrowing can quickly spiral out of control. For families already living paycheck to paycheck, the rising cost of debt payments is a major source of stress. Not only does this affect their ability to cover day-to-day expenses, but it can also prevent them from saving for future goals like home ownership or retirement. So how can families manage the growing debt burden? The first step is prioritizing high-interest debt. Consider transferring balances to lower-interest credit cards or consolidating loans to reduce payments. Creating a budget that limits borrowing and focuses on reducing debt is also crucial. For families struggling to keep up, seeking advice from a financial counselor or debt management service can provide a clear path to regain control. Number 7. The impact on savings and investments. Inflation doesn't just affect your daily expenses. It also has a significant impact on your savings and investments. As prices rise, the value of money decreases, meaning that the purchasing power of your savings is steadily eroding. This can have serious long-term consequences, particularly for families trying to build a nest egg for the future. One of the biggest challenges families face is that savings accounts are offering much lower returns than they used to. With inflation outpacing interest rates on savings, your money isn't growing as fast as it once did. In fact, high inflation can mean that the value of the money sitting in a traditional savings account could actually shrink over time. For example, if inflation's running at 6%, but your savings account only offers 1% interest, you're effectively losing 5% of your money's value each year. Investments aren't immune to inflation either. For those who have investments in stocks, bonds, or mutual funds, inflation can increase the volatility of the market. While some investments can outpace inflation over time, there's always the risk that they may not perform as expected. As inflation increases, interest rates on things like bonds may also rise, making fixed-rate investments less appealing. So how can families protect their savings from inflation's impact? One option is to invest in inflation-protected securities, like Treasury inflation-protected securities, TIPS, or inflation-linked bonds. It's also a good idea to consider diversifying your investment portfolio, spreading risk across a variety of assets. Additionally, real estate can be a hedge against inflation, as property values tend to increase over time. Number 6. Higher healthcare costs. The rising cost of healthcare is another major impact of inflation that UK families are feeling. From prescription medications to private health insurance premiums, health-related expenses have been steadily climbing, leaving many families struggling to keep up with both basic and emergency care costs. In the UK, while the NHS provides essential health services free at the point of use, private healthcare options are becoming increasingly expensive. Many families are turning to private health insurance to reduce wait times or get access to treatments that might not be covered by the NHS. However, premiums for private health plans have risen sharply, and it's not uncommon to see increases of 10 to 15% in just 1 year. This means that families who already pay for coverage are paying more for the same services, putting a strain on their finances. Even for families relying solely on the NHS, the costs of prescription medications, dental care, and eye care are increasing. For example, The cost of prescriptions has remained at £9.35 per item, but inflation is pushing the cost of medications and treatments higher across the board. Dental and eye care services, which are often not fully covered by the NHS, have also been hit by inflation, making them less affordable for families. So how can families manage these rising healthcare costs? Start by shopping around for the best insurance plans or seeking out free or low-cost clinics. When it comes to medications, consider using generic drugs, which are often much cheaper than their branded counterparts. For dental and eye care, look for discount schemes or NHS-affiliated providers. How have rising healthcare costs affected your family's budget? Share your experiences and tips for cutting healthcare expenses in the comments below. Number 5. Impact on childcare and education. For many families, the rising costs of childcare and education are becoming an increasingly significant burden. As inflation drives up the price of everything from daycare to school supplies, parents are finding themselves stretched thin, trying to balance work, family life, and the ever-growing expenses of raising children. Let's start with childcare. In the UK, the cost of daycare and after-school programs has surged by up to 15% in some areas. For a family with young children, this can mean paying an extra £100 to £200 a month per child. The financial pressure is especially tough for single parents or families with multiple children, as these costs often make up a significant portion of their monthly budget. Then, there's education. While education itself remains free in the UK, additional costs like uniforms, school trips, and extracurricular activities are rising rapidly. A recent survey showed that the average family spends over £1,000 per child on these extras each year. In some cases, families are even having to choose between affordable options for their kids' education or cutting back on other necessities like food or heating. So, how can parents manage these rising costs? One strategy is to look into subsidised childcare options or government assistance programs that may be available. For education-related expenses, second-hand uniforms, free school meals, and discounted activities can help reduce costs. It's also worth exploring scholarships or grants for extracurricular activities and even higher education. Have rising childcare and education costs made an impact on your family? Share your experience and tips for managing these expenses in the comments below. Number 4. Increased transportation expenses. Inflation is also taking a toll on how much UK families are paying to get around. Whether it's for driving, public transport, or even ride-sharing services, transportation costs have surged, and it's affecting nearly every part of daily life. For families who rely on a car to commute or run errands, the cost of petrol has been particularly painful. In the past year, petrol prices have fluctuated wildly, with some areas seeing prices rise by over 20%. This may not sound like much at first, but for a family driving daily, it quickly adds up to a substantial increase in monthly expenses. For example, if your car's fuel costs rise by £20 to £30 per week, that's an extra £100 to £120 per month you didn't plan for. Public transportation hasn't been immune to the effects of inflation either. Train fares, bus tickets, and even tube rides have increased, sometimes by as much as 10 to 15% in just a few months. For a family relying on public transport to get to work, school, or appointments, these price hikes can create a real financial strain. So what can families do to keep transportation costs under control? For car owners, reducing fuel consumption can help. Simple changes, like driving more efficiently, carpooling, or using eco-friendly routes, can make a noticeable difference in fuel costs. Alternatively, switching to public transport for short trips or using a bike when possible can save you money. Another option is to shop around for better insurance rates or look into electric vehicles that may be cheaper in the long run. Number 3. Energy bills that keep climbing. One of the most eye-watering impacts of inflation on UK families is the rise in energy bills. Over the past year, electricity, gas, and heating costs have soared, leaving many households struggling to keep up. As inflation increases, energy suppliers are forced to adjust their rates, and unfortunately, those higher costs are passed directly on to consumers. For many families, energy bills have become one of the largest monthly expenses. According to recent figures, the average annual gas and electricity bill has jumped by nearly 50% in some areas. That means the typical household could be paying an extra £1,000 or more each year, just to keep their lights on and stay warm. For families already juggling tight budgets, this is a heavy burden to bear. But why are energy bills going up? A lot of it comes down to the rising cost of raw materials, such as gas and oil, which are used to generate power. As global inflation affects the supply and demand for these resources, prices increase, and consumers feel the pressure. And with winter approaching, energy consumption naturally spikes as families rely more on heating and lighting. So how can you tackle these rising energy costs? Start by making your home more energy efficient. Simple steps like switching to LED bulbs, insulating your home, and using energy-efficient appliances can help lower your bills. You can also save by shopping around for the best energy tariffs or by switching providers if you haven't done so in a while. Are you feeling the sting of rising energy bills this year? Share your tips for cutting costs in the comments below. Number 2. Rising housing and rent costs. When it comes to inflation, housing and rent costs are hitting UK families the hardest. Over the past few years, rental prices have increased dramatically, especially in urban areas where demand is consistently high. Whether you're renting or trying to buy, it seems like prices are only climbing, and it's a major source of financial strain for many families. According to recent reports, rents in some parts of the UK have risen by over 10% in just 1 year. For a typical family renting a 2-bedroom flat, this could mean an additional £100 to £200 per month. That doesn't seem like much at first glance, but when you add it up over a year, it's a substantial chunk of your income. And if you're a homeowner, mortgage payments aren't much better, especially with the rise in interest rates. With inflation driving housing costs higher, many families are facing the difficult decision of whether to stay in their current homes or move to somewhere more affordable. But even that decision is becoming more complicated, as affordable homes are becoming increasingly scarce. So what can you do if you're feeling the pinch in housing costs? If you're renting, consider downsizing to a smaller property or moving to a less expensive area. If moving isn't an option, talk to your landlord about rent freezes or long-term leases to lock in your current rate. Another smart move is to share living spaces with family or friends to reduce costs. Have you had to adjust your living situation due to rising housing costs? Let us know how you've been managing in the comments. Number 1. The soaring cost of everyday goods. One of the most noticeable effects of inflation is the sharp increase in the prices of everyday goods. If you've been grocery shopping recently, you've probably seen a hike in prices across the board, from fresh produce to packaged snacks and cleaning products. Inflation has caused the cost of food and household items to skyrocket, making it harder for families to stick to their budgets. Take groceries, for example. In the past year alone, the price of basic staples like bread, milk, and eggs has increased significantly. According to recent studies, UK households have seen their grocery bills rise by up to £300 per year on average. That's a substantial amount, especially for families with limited income. Even toiletries and cleaning supplies aren't exempt, with prices climbing as manufacturers pass on their higher production costs to consumers. The impact of these rising costs extends beyond just the grocery store. Everyday products like toilet paper, detergents, and personal care items have also become more expensive. It's a double whammy, as families are forced to spend more for the same amount of goods they were buying just a few months ago. So how can you combat this? Start by meal prepping. Planning your meals for the week ahead can save you money by allowing you to buy only what you need and avoid those impulse buys. Additionally, buying in bulk for items you use regularly, like pasta or rice, can save you a lot in the long run. Switching to own brand products rather than premium ones is another simple way to cut costs without sacrificing quality. We've covered a lot of ground today, from skyrocketing energy bills to the mental health toll inflation is taking on families. The reality is that rising costs are affecting almost every part of daily life, but with the right strategies, you can start protecting your finances and stay ahead of the curve. Now, it's your turn. How has inflation impacted your family? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We put a lot of effort into bringing you valuable, real-world information, and we'd love to hear how you're navigating these challenges. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's just one click and means the world to us. Stay informed, stay empowered, and be sure to catch our next video for more tips on surviving and thriving in today's economy.